The Paris Peace Conference convened in January 1919 at Versailles, just outside of Paris. The conference was called to establish the terms of the peace after World War I. Though nearly 30 nations participated, the representatives of the United Kingdom, France, the United States, and Italy became known as the Big Four. The Big Four dominated the proceedings that led to the formulation of the Treaty of Versailles, a treaty that ended World War I.
During the conference, French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau controlled his delegation. His main goal was to weaken Germany militarily and economically. On June 28, 1919, this treaty was signed at the Palace of Versailles outside of Paris, France, by Germany and the Allied nations. This treaty was one of several treaties that formally ended World War I. There were terms to this treaty. It subjected Germany to some strict punitive measures. That meant that Germany had to pay reparations, disarm, lose territory, and give up all of its overseas colonies. The Treaty of Versailles actually got rejected twice by the United States Senate, but they signed a different treaty with Germany after. They accepted the guilt of war, and it took Germany several years to fully pay off the reparations.
The League of Nations was established by the Treaty of Versailles. They aimed to promote peace by preventing future wars. They did this by war guilt, huge reparation payments, and limiting Germany's military powers. It ended the state of war between Germany and Allied powers and was extremely effective. An event that led up to the Treaty of Versailles was when the Allies had a meet and debate with 32 other countries. Wilson created peace proposals known as the 14 Points. This allowed people to wish on what they wanted from the government. France and Britain had little signs of agreeing to Wilson's visions because they wanted to strip Germany of the war, which caused the Treaty of Versailles being signed.
The League of Nations was an international organization headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland, created after the First World War to provide a forum for resolving international disputes. Though first proposed by President Woodrow Wilson as part of his 14 Points Plan for an equitable peace in Europe, the U.S. never became a member.
The League of Nations was formed in January 10, 1920, and they later had their first assembly on November 15, 1920. The League of Nations was originally planned to include the United States, Great Britain, France, Italy, and Japan. Things turned out differently, as the permanent members of the League of Nations instead were France, Italy, Japan, and the British Empire. The main purpose of the League of Nations was to prevent another world war and to maintain the peace. They did this by resolving the international disputes. The League of Nations soon disbanded on April 20th, 1946. They disbanded because their efforts were for nothing, as another world war had broke out, and Germany, Japan, and Italy had quit. The goal of the Paris Peace Conference was to establish peace again after World War I. This was not achieved, as there was another battle later on. The Paris Peace Conference didn't work because the other nations were unresponsive to it, and Vietnamese forces frequently broke the agreements.
It limited the German army and navy in size and allowed for the trial of Kaiser Wilhelm II and a number of other high-ranking German officials as war criminals. Under the terms of Article 231 of the treaty, the Germans accepted responsibility for the war and the liability to pay financial reparation to the Allies. The Paris Peace Conference was the collection of diplomats and heads of government that met to write the various treaties to settle World War I. The Treaty of Versailles was the resultant treaty with Germany. There was a separate treaty for each of the Central Powers. Versailles was the treaty with only Germany. One major difference this treaty was different from other treaties was the severity of the terms imposed on Germany. The Treaty of Versailles placed full blame for the war on Germany and its allies, and imposed heavy reparations on Germany to pay for the damages caused by the war.
Germany's World War I debt was so crushing that it took 92 years to pay off. After the Treaty of Versailles called for punishing reparations, economic collapse and another world war thwarted Germany's ability to pay.